So
Really?
since the broadcast
In a world where the quality of information available to poorer communities is doctored, tainted and sometimes regressive, where the words fake news have come to mean other people's opinions, it is vital to rely on news platforms with journalists who have feet on the ground and can report the truth. New York Parrot, a New York-based national and global news outlet, is changing the narratives of media operations. We focus on the news that matters, like self-empowerment, entrepreneurship, finances, health, security, politics, and more. We strive to curb violence, racial and economic discrimination, and to promote peace and socio-economic development of multiculturally diverse world. As we give voice to the people, we also give your business a voice and make it heard. Get your products and services off the ground by advertising on our fast-growing platform. With so much of daily visits to New York Parrot, you can't afford to be invisible to prospective clients on the website they trust the most. Our posts reach millions of people across the New York State and around the world. Advertising on our news site will unlock an audience of thousands of potential customers on your doorstep. New York Parrot is born to prosperously speak tomorrow for the voiceless.
Hello out there. Welcome to the Foreign Policy Review. I'll be hosting the show today along with Billy Bob. Dustin Pickering is again on assignment. So it'll just be us two. We have no special guest today. And to kick it off, we'd like to talk about a little bit about COVID-19 and the way it's represented by people like Jimmy Dore and Max Blumenthal and Jackson Hinkle. You want to say something before I go on my rant?
Well, I want to hear what you have to say. There might be a little disagreement on the show, and that's good. And I don't have super strong opinions on COVID-19. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not sure what to make of things. I'm not sure what's going on, behind the scenes. So, I want to hear your take, and then, maybe I will be persuaded. Maybe I'll not be persuaded, but definitely, what specifically are these commentators saying? I know you generally you've already kind of not appreciating them for their outreach to Trump supporters and things like that. So what is it on COVID-19 that is getting you upset with them?
Well, let me take a sip of my energy drink first. Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission water, tap water. It's got a distinct fizz and odor. It's really tasty.
It's better than Flint. It's cleaner than Flint, Michigan.
Cleaner than Flint, definitely cleaner than Flint, Michigan, and that's not saying very much. COVID-19. I just wrote this little sentence to this morning, or phrase. Money is only a virus, metaphorically, and that's the confusion we're getting with some people on the left who want to rightly denigrate big pharma for grifting people on the COVID virus, but ignoring the fact that that doesn't extend to the science itself. And what you might say, hey, bearded old man, what are you talking about? Well, I would point out that last week or the week before, we passed 8 billion people on the planet. 8 billion. How many people have died from COVID-19, coronavirus? 6.7 million. So obviously, either it was a great big hoax, and I'll deal with that in a moment, or big pharma, in Pfizer, for example, thwarted the effort to thin the herd of a world's population by bringing up this virus, because they fucked the oligarchs who wanted to kill, I guess, 2 billion people, or whatever your estimate was, whatever the clowns' estimates were out there on the right and the left. It's not happening. 6.7. It's horrendous. That's a lot of deaths. But by the same token, it's not nearly enough to make an impact on a population of 8 billion. Now, if you listen to Jimmy Dore or Max Blumenthal, primarily on Jimmy Dore or Jackson Hinkle, you would get the impression that it was the science that was wrong. Well, it's not the science that was wrong, because they're not equipped to talk about the science. The science is distinct from the fact that Big Pharma is grifting. It's like the phrase I threw out last month or something. What does Little Pharma look like? What does Little Pharma look like? Well, and nobody had an answer for me at all. One guy said cute. That was his total contribution to that. Well, if we don't know what Little Pharma looks like. So we need, obviously, right now, to stop the pandemic, we needed Big Pharma, and they did come on, look at the numbers. They did a great job. The scientists did a wonderful job. People got grifted, sure, by the business end, but the scientists came up in record time with a vaccine. So, and the other irony about what Jimmy Dore, Max Blumenthal, and Jackson Hinkle are saying is, I go, what does Little Pharma look like? Well, what does Big Pharma look like? So we know what Big Pharma looks like now, but Jimmy Dore's and Max Blumenthal's remedy for that has no application, because they've already pointed out via Fauci, for instance, of the way they've assassinated his character. They have pointed out that big pharma is government too, and they don't trust that. So what are they going to do? They're going to get rid of the old system with all of these corporate elements involved, and then let it be entirely government. Now, there's a certain logic to that, because all the basic research is paid for us by the taxpayers.
Yeah,
that basic logic, and all the scientists basically are all in universities around the country. They're doing basic research and everything. They have there's no moral qualms for engineers making weapons and all that stuff. And that research originates in universities primarily, and these privately funded research.
Yeah.
But if you don't trust Big Pharma the way we have it now, and of course when it comes to the money, I don't trust them. We all pay a lot of money for our prescriptions and that sort of thing. But if we don't trust them, and they're allied with government, as the way Dore and Blumenthal and Hinkle are constantly shouting, then we can't trust the other side either. We couldn't trust we couldn't even trust Medicare for all, because that would be corrupted by the fact that it's involved with an already corrupt government system as they see it. So I don't know what the fuck they're talking about, and the fact that they're confusing science and grifting is.
Okay, so let me ask you a question just to really understand your position. So, and again, I'm not persuaded this is true, but you're kind of implying that if it weren't for Pfizer and Big Pharma creating these vaccines, there would be a lot more deaths worldwide. So to me, that's an open question. Like you're just like implying that as if it's a proven fact. But to me, like that might be true, but it's definitely not beyond doubt that Big Pharma kept the death toll from being considerably more than it already is. Like, I'm not sure that's true. So what would you tell me to convince me that implied argument that was inherent in what you said is actually factual? Like, what data do you have that supports the idea that the vaccines really curbed the death tolls, and without those vaccines, there would have been how many more deaths do you think there would have been? Double, triple, quadruple? How many people got vaccinated in Africa? I think very few, but the Africans, their death toll is very low. So I'm just, there's so many questions. I'm just not sold on any given narrative. And the things implied in your argument you just stated, I'm not convinced are true. They might be. I just don't know.
Well, first of all, we would only go down the rabbit hole that Peachum Sorokin pointed out of relying too much on statistics. In fact, I don't want to get off topic too much, but last night I watched an interesting exchange between Noam Chomsky and a researcher that had befriended him on GPT-3. That's artificial intelligence, and they literally made the Sorokin argument, which is supposed to only apply to social sciences, to the hard science of computer engineering, and a leap that I've been called an idiot for trying to bring out for the last 50 years, and now it's quickly becoming, through these new developments, de rigueur, that who's the idiot now sort of thing. But having said that, I would take one statistic from the U.S. Statisticians. 85% of the people who died of COVID were unvaccinated. So, to take your thing, 3 out of 20 people were vaccinated and died from COVID, and 17 out of 20 unvaccinated people died out of COVID. So to get an estimate of people in the United States that would have died, now 1.1 million people, it's a little over that now, approaching 1.2 million Americans have died from COVID. So to extrapolate that, all you'd have to do is say 3 into 17 it's not 6 times, but it's close enough. Let's be generous to the anti-vaxxers and call it 5 times. So multiply 5 times, say 1 million. Let's really be generous. So 5 times 1 million would be 5 million, or between 5 and 6 million. And that's being generous. That's low. So the answer to your question is 5.5 million, let's say, instead of 1.1 million. There's your answer.
Okay, so I would respond, and I would suggest that perhaps 80% of people died in the beginning months of COVID, and these are always the most they have the most comorbidities. They're the most at risk of fatality. So there's people over 90, people over 80. So I think most people that died from COVID, a majority, way over 50%, were already past their life expectancy. So there's an argument to make that perhaps these people that died early on, even if they would have been vaccinated, they still would have died too, and that would have skewed the data, the numbers that you just shared. So the numbers that you just shared can be rebutted, but again, I don't know, and I'm not honestly that I don't think I can know, and so that's why I don't really have a strong opinion on it. But the numbers don't prove it, because there might be other numbers, such as the fact that the majority of people dying, it's possible that even if they did get the vaccine, they would have died anyway, because they had the comorbidities, they were very old, and they were in there was tens of thousands of deaths in New York because of how they treated the people in the retirement homes, and they just kept it in there, just went through there, and a lot of people died in those early days, and it's I'm not satisfied that if they would have had the vaccine that most of them would have lived. I'm not sure that's true. But again, yeah, it's tough for me, because it's it's kind of unknowable. And so when things are unknowable, I just don't get that excited about them. But I'm very suspicious. Very suspicious. And for that reason, I don't come down hard on Hinkle and Dorr like you do, but you're more than entitled to your opinion.
Well, let me just say, first of all, being one of those people that has every comorbidity you could have, and don't let my strong voice fool anyone. I kind of resent that approach. I haven't had COVID, and I just basically part of it's because I work out of my house, and I was rarely out. I wore a mask, and we used alcohol in the car when we got back in the car wherever we went. So we took my wife and I took precautions. But anecdotally, I know a guy who you're right. He worked in a nursing home, and he said within the first couple of months, 20 elderly people died in that nursing home, and 2 staff. Now the staff were not old. The staff were relatively young people. And he refused, and this guy I know, he refused to get the vaccine, and they fired him, and he was resentful. Well, tough break, fat boy. I don't give a fuck. You were fired for a good cause as far as I'm concerned, because you could have been a carrier that killed some of those people. I remember the show that Regis Tremblay had, and he was having this whack job on, and she was coming down hard on COVID, and her evidence for a government conspiracy about all of this stuff was, and she said she did deep research. Bullshit. All she was doing was reading from a book by Eustace Mullins, of all people, who was a fascist KKK member, right-wing Nazi who lived in Northern Virginia, not far in Lynchburg, not far from where I live, in Washington. And this guy was a eugenicist. He believed that all black people should be exterminated. And she's going on about what a great book this is. And he was an asshole. Total. Yeah. I corresponded with him. You can't believe what an evil person this guy was. And she's going on about how brilliant he is on the U.S. government interfering, and Tremblay's believing all of that, listening to all that. So one day he has her on, and she talks about her boyfriend. He's just died. He got COVID. As a young man, in his 30s. I think she's mentioned in his 30s, maybe 39. But anyway, she kept telling him, "Don't go to the hospital. Don't go to the hospital. You got COVID, but don't go to the hospital." He finally went to the hospital. He died. She was blaming it on the hospital instead of herself. She killed him. She murdered him. And this is why I think Jimmy Dore and Max Blumenthal and Jackson Hinkle should shut the fuck up, because they're killing people. When people accuse them of killing people, they are. They are. People, you read the comments. It's anti-vaxxer, 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 anti. That's who listens to them now. They've become Breitbart as far as COVID-19 goes. They become Breitbart. They're on the far right, and the only people commenting positively are people on the far right, or you have an element on the left that's conspiratorial, that is willing to accept any kind of conspiracy.
What are your thoughts of
Rachel?
When Rachel Maddow says, you get the vaccine, it stops the virus transmission. You can't give it to anybody else once you get the vaccine. Because it sounded like you kind of just parroted that mistruth, because you said that the guy, that if he would have, he refused to get the vaccine and he lost his job, and if he would have got the vaccine, he would have then been safe to work in this environment because he couldn't have transmitted it. But we know that that's not true, right? We know that you get the vaccine, you can still transmit the virus.
He wouldn't wear a fucking mask. He wouldn't wear a mask.
So do you understand, though, that
the basic precautions?
Do you understand that the vaccine doesn't stop transmission? That you can get the vaccine and you can still get COVID and you can transmit COVID to other people?
But logic.
What are your thoughts?
If you wear a mask,
about Rachel Maddow? Rachel Maddow?
She's an idiot.
Okay,
she's a big Russiagate fool.
I agree. And she straight up lied about the vaccines, and she's lying.
Me with her is basically insulting. Yeah.
Okay? She was lying for Big Pharma. She was trying to get people to take the vaccine, and she lied about the efficacy of it. So it's kind of, it's the opposite of informed consent. It's unethical. She's using her platform to lie to get people to take the vaccine, And I don't know that's ethical. You want to tell people the truth, give them an informed decision. I don't think people should lose their jobs. And I guess in New York City, a bunch of people got their jobs back with back pay because a court ruled that they shouldn't have been summarily fired. But we're already talking past each other. So
yes, because what you're talking about, is if you got the vaccine, then these people wouldn't have gotten sick or wouldn't have the potential to get sick. Now, a mask makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah,
believe me.
It does.
We were talking face to face, I'd have to give you a towel because I spittle all over everybody because I lose it, and I get spittle all over them. If I had COVID, you'd be dead because it would. So a mask has a lot of efficacy.
No, it does.
How many fucking times have I heard Jimmy Dore look for some crank that says that masks don't help or some little snippet out of context? Out of context. This guy's constantly quoting out of context. And he can't even pronounce half the words in these.
No, that's fair. So I agree with you. And here's what I didn't like about Max recently. So recently, if we're gonna attack poor Max, I don't like his stance on China, and I think you're right to a point. His anti-COVID, I don't know. He's really into the COVID thing, and it really gets him excited. And I think he's been attacking China for their zero COVID policy, and he's really in support of the protesters in China who are understandably getting sick of these anti-COVID measures. But I think there's a broader discussion to be had, and I don't think Max. Well, you know what? When I say Max, I mean Jimmy Dore. But actually, they were both on. I meant to say I was thinking of Jimmy when I said Max, but they were actually both on the show that I watched on YouTube about the their coverage of the China COVID protests. So I guess what applies to Jimmy kind of does apply to Max, but Jimmy more so was he was more really pro the protesters, anti the Chinese policy to help try and mitigate and keep COVID down to as close to zero as possible. Max seemed a little bit more, understanding of why China was doing what they were doing. But it's a huge question. I think China is kind of treating it like it's a biological warfare. They're kind of treating it like it's a biological attack against their country, and they're not playing with it. They're not messing around. And that approach of zero COVID has resulted in a tremendously low death toll and tremendously low rates of transmission. So it's really been effective. It's a tough thing to deal with a pandemic like this, and we'll see if they continue this or not. But it's clear that people in the West want them to stop that policy of zero COVID, and it's curious that people in the West are so invested of denouncing China's COVID policy and saying to quit it. And Max, well, not Max, Jimmy is definitely parroting the mainstream media. Like, he's parroting the establishment by denouncing China's policy. He's not any different from the establishment in his denunciation of their policy. Again, it's hard for me to know with certainty what is in China's best interest, but definitely what they've done so far has worked pretty well. Their economy is okay, and their people are doing way, way, way better than people in the West. But I understand there's COVID fatigue. Like, people are sick of lockdowns, and they're going to be protesting it because they're going to look in their narrow field of vision, and they're going to be sick of it. And meanwhile, hey, it's up to the government to make these decisions, and they're tough decisions to make. And I really support the Chinese government, and they've done a great job so far. But what they're going to do in the future, it's a tough call.
I support them too. Look, I can't believe veterans like Max Blumenthal. I can believe Dore kind of waivers, or actually I can't because one of his major things have been understanding imperial U.S. policy. I have three, well, maybe 6 or 7 words for this: George Soros, NED, and the CIA in Langley. That's George Soros's is providing the funds for the destabilization. He's provided funds for the Uyghur bullshit, for the Taiwanese bullshit, for the COVID bullshit. That's what the guy does. He provides part of his billions to go around destabilizing. Look, he's part of the Open Society. Karl Popper, one of the greatest fascist thinkers of the 20th century, masquerading as a democrat, a hero for democracy. What horse shit! He's talk about somebody that was for the oligarchy. And so you've got that. You got that element there. So nothing else needs to be said, because the fact of the matter is, you're right. The Chinese have done a wonderful job. It's like I pointed out that even just north of us in Canada, they have only 10%. Well, we have 3,086 deaths per million here in the U.S. last time I looked, and Canada was like 310 deaths per million. So just in Canada, given their thing. So we don't even need to talk about that. It's what's happening with this, as regards these so-called protests. They're just more bought protests by Soros and the NED, the CIA, and us taxpayers. Well, a lot of our money goes to leading. I mean, in Bolivia, we got another attempt, another at coup. Well, the U.S. was behind that. At my age, after facing this bullshit for 55 years, I shouldn't have to fucking say this to people. But Christ all fucking mighty. It's just Soros and CIA bullshit. They buy a few people. They put Hong Kong is another good example, and they put the money in their pockets, and they say, go out and do this in the streets, take the risks, and if it will take care of you. Tell that to the Afghani translators.
It's important to point out, because I know there's a group of fake Western leftists who are gonna anytime somebody points out Soros, they're immediately gonna label you an anti-Semite. So Soros, of course, yes, but also all the others, the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, all these think tanks and influence groups that are funded by billionaires. In this democracy promotion, they call it democracy promotion, and it's anything but. So, but yeah, no, Soros he's probably the single most biggest contributor to these, but there's a whole bunch of rich, wealthy Western billionaires that do the exact same thing. And together they're the oligarchy. They're the ones that control our government, and they're the one that set the policy with their think tanks. And they privately fund the implementation of these things around the world. And it's terrible. It's awful. And it's the total opposite of democratic. So you listed, before the show, you listed several topics. So we're about to go to break.
Yeah.
What would you like to, after the break, like, do you want to keep going with COVID, or do you want to switch, or?
I think after the break, it's a great segue into Scott Ritter, and we want to talk anti-Semitism. We'll talk Scott Ritter and how he's dealing with the Ukraine Nazis when we come back from break.
And I can't take us to break. I don't know if you can either. We're at the mercy of
MUTIU has to take us to break.
We might.
Apparently, he's not out there. Let's do it.
Yeah. If he wants to take us to break, he can. But so I'm interested. So I've been very busy these past couple of weeks. I'm not sure I caught a single Scott Ritter thing. So please, you said you had you would really liked what he was saying recently. So share with all of us your take on Scott Ritter and why you're so impressed with his recent advocacy.
Well, Scott Ritter has been absolutely phlegmatic on several shows I've watched. And when it comes to the U.S. funding stone cold Nazis in Ukraine, he's had enough. He doesn't take any prisoners, to use another metaphor. he cannot stand the idea, having spent much of his life in the Marine Corps, that and having been around veterans of World War II, and I can't either. This notion that Nazis would be in the ascendancy in the U.S. and I want to say that my association with the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists goes back to the 80s, because back in the 80s, when I was doing a community access television show, one of the big stories was Covert Action Information Bulletins reports. That's Lou Wolf and Philip Agee's journal, now Covert Action Magazine. They were doing report after report after report of these Nazis in upstate New York, really close to where Scott Ritter lives, who were brought over in Operation Paperclip, basically by the Dulles brothers and that other slime who always worked with Nazis, even Prescott Bush, that they were supporting Ronald Reagan. And it was outrageous to me at that time that these people, these Nazis, would be infiltrating the so-called democratic process in the U.S.
Hey, Carlo, MUTIU wants to take us to break, so we'll do a 1 minute break and pick up right where you left off when we come back.
Okay.
In a world where the quality of information available to poorer communities is doctored, tainted and sometimes regressive, where the words fake news have come to mean other people's opinions, it is vital to rely on news platforms with journalists who have feet on the ground and can report the truth. New York Parrot, a New York-based national and global news outlet, is changing the narratives of media operations. We focus on the news that matters, like self-empowerment, entrepreneurship, finances, health, security, politics, and more. We strive to curb violence, racial and economic discrimination, and to promote peace and socio-economic development of multiculturally diverse world. As we give voice to the people, we also give your business a voice and make it heard. Get your products and services off the ground by advertising on our fast-growing platform. With so much of daily visits to New York Parrot, you can't afford to be invisible to prospective clients on the website they trust the most. Our posts reach millions of people across the New York State and around the world. Advertising on our new site will unlock an audience of thousands of potential customers on your doorstep. New York Parrot is born to prosperously speak tomorrow for the voiceless.
So, Carlo, you were sharing an anecdote about your personal engagement with these wonderful Nazi fellows.
They're beautiful people. Yeah, they're dogs. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is, if you're wondering why they have such influence in Congress, they've been here since World War II, and they've been working their way into Congress, and they've got a lot of politicians in their back pocket now. And I'm talking about the OUN, the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, or the Organization of Ukrainian Nazis, if you will, here in the U.S.
Or apt, yeah.
And I want to say one more anecdotal story, which I've told you before. I'll tell the audience now. Is that when we were doing our television show, some friends of ours from San Francisco came up to see the AIDS quilt, and we told them we would do a program of their visit, and we would go down to the AIDS quilt and we would tape it with them. So we did that. We did that for a whole day. It was a very emotional day because one of my closest friends who lives in San Francisco now, he had literally watched 64 of his friends die. He was working hospice for 10 years, and it was just and his lover died as a consequence of AIDS. Very emotional day. We were drained, so we got a lot of good footage, and my wife and I and Robbie and Bob went to sit on the steps across the street from the mall and one of the museums, and I saw this demonstration taking place off to the right of the AIDS quilt. So I said, Rosalie, let's go check that out and see what it is. Well, it happened to be the OUN, the Organization of Ukrainian Nazis, which I knew everything about. And they were giving, I have to say, in all fairness, there were people that looked like they were dressed up like Eagle Scouts, kind of trying to give the Nazi salute. And other people were saying, don't do that. Kind of like, you could see it on the stage. It was like, so we started filming. And of course, they didn't want that. So they tried, the crowd, which wasn't that large, maybe 150 people, 200 people, they tried to grab our cameras. Well, we got the hell out of there. But anyway, that was an experience, a direct experience, ironically, accidental, that I had.
They didn't want that bad press to get out there.
But I want to point out that if they can get a permit to hold a rally on the mall,
yeah,
these are Nazis. A rally on the mall, they have influence. Nobody screened them. Nobody said, no, we can't have this. You killed too many of our boys in World War II, you motherfuckers. So it wasn't like that.
Thankfully, you survived the ordeal. I can tell. That's good.
I don't want to say it was that bad, but it was pretty freaky. My wife thinks I'm a hero, so.
But so Scott Ritter's really been going strong. I think Scott is at his best when he gets emotional. I know he tries not to, and his wife is always trying to calm him down. But I really think he's spectacular when he gets riled up. I mean, that's when he really is powerful, I think. So I haven't caught him recently. So I'm glad that you were paying attention, and he's doing some good advocacy against this ridiculous, sending of money to the Nazi, our Nazi puppet regime there in Ukraine. It's abominable. What else did we want to discuss?
Well, this is a great segue into January 6th. We could talk about two different kinds of Nazis, or two different kinds of fascists.
Okay.
And I want to talk about the FBI, because the whole notion that the FBI set these people up is ludicrous. Are you going to try to tell me that Roger Stone and Steve Bannon and Amy Reamer didn't know that the FBI infiltrated the crowd? Are you going to try to tell me the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys did not know that the FBI infiltrates crowds? They know. I mean, you might be able to sell that to the general American public, that I can't believe there's people out there that still don't know what COINTELPRO was. You could probably sell that to them. But Steve Bannon, he's thoroughly versed in what happened with COINTELPRO, because he's turned so much of that ideology on its head to work for him, the leftist ideology. Dustin and I have talked about this at length, that turning leftist, the language of the left into the language of the right, and pursuing that. So the whole notion that the FBI convinced this crowd to go up to the Capitol is patently absurd, because you would have to have fooled all these people who are thoroughly versed in how the FBI works and operates in things like COINTELPRO. So the other thing I would say is, no. First of all, you have the virtue signaling crowd here who are supporting Ukraine, and they don't know about the Nazis. They've never heard of Maidan. They've never heard of the CIA training ex-Nazis, Bandera Nazis since World War II. They've never heard of the Minsk Accords, and they don't want to hear it, because that's the way Americans are. They're fucking idiots. You can't. It's true. You can't compare the fascist elements here with the Nazis operating in Ukraine. I mean, the Nazis operating in Ukraine had amassed a force of 80,000 people many of them Azov to go into the Donbass and basically kill everybody that was there, men, women, and children. That was the plan. You could talk about, oh, Poroshenko is just a candy maker, or Zelensky's just a clown who plays the piano with his dick. But they were going to stand aside and let the Azov go in to Donbass and slaughter an additional million or so people on top of the 14,000 they'd already killed in the Donbass.
Yeah, that's a great point, Carlo. Like what was Russia supposed to do
Exactly.
when you have these nut job, virulently anti-Russian people who that's what they wanted to do, and that's what they were openly saying they were going to do. They were going to reclaim these territories, first the Donbass and then Crimea. And how do you do that without, a mass genocide of the ethnic Russian people that want nothing to do with a Nazi government? So that's exactly what was going to happen, and that was the kind of provocation that the U.S. was certain would result in a Russian military response. There's no choice for Russia, and that's why the whole thing was provoked from the very beginning by the West in order to start this. And I think there's a great little 2-minute clip from like 2019 or 2018. And it's one of the main officials in the Zelensky government, and he's basically predicting. He's like, hey, he's telling the reporter, there's going to be a war. Our hope is we win this war, where there's going to be a large ground war, and this is like 2018, and he knew it. Like I forget his name, Alexei. His name escapes me, but. He's the propaganda. He's one of the main propagandists for the government, and he's on Ukrainian TV every day, giving a daily reports. I can't remember his name, but like they knew this was coming. So the whole point of the Minsk, according to Poroshenko, was to delay things and give more time to allow NATO to arm and equip the Ukrainian military so they would stand a better chance of defeating the Russians on the battlefield. And of course, the West is telling, the Ukrainian military, hey, we got you. You're not going to lose. You're not going to lose with us at your back. We're going to do whatever it takes to make you win. It remains to be seen if the U.S. is going to follow through on that promise. They always drop their proxies. They always end up saying, okay, cutting their losses and running. I mean, and I think that's what they're going to do here too. But they've definitely convinced this regime and the Ukrainian military that they're going to win, and that's the hope, that they're going to beat Russia on the battlefield, and that'll be great for the West. It'll be terrible for Russia, and imperialism will win. But I don't think that's going to happen.
No. The last plane out of Saigon. The last helicopter out of Saigon, the last helicopter out of Afghanistan, and the last helicopter that went down in Mogadishu. So yeah, it's they'll cut and run. They don't give a rat's rectum about Ukraine.
Yeah.
Back in when was this? My computer is saying that my battery's low, even though I'm not running on a battery. So if I disappear, you gotta carry on, Billy Bob.
Okay.
But I remember when I was doing a blog, I can't remember, back in the 90s, I guess. And every month, I get like 40,000 views, and these people were and the people I did that were hosting it, they would give me a list of where most of the people reviewers were from. And the United States, of course, was first, and Great Britain was second, the English-speaking countries, Australia. But then suddenly, in 2004, that's right, that's when I was doing it, 2004. In 2004, there was the George Soros-led, by God it, a soft coup against Yanukovych, the first one. And of course, they threw him out. I want to say something about Yanukovych briefly that people don't seem to get. Yanukovych had to make a decision. Actually, I could segue into it. So I started writing people and saying, you don't want to get rid of Yanukovych, and you don't want to lean west. This is a George Soros hike. He will take the U.S. will take your economy to the toilet. You will become shit if you listen to the U.S. and adopt their thing. Sure enough, not only did my hits from Ukraine became number 2 under the United States, number 2, that euphemism, but under the U.S., but they weren't taking my advice. They wanted the material goods and all this that they saw people in the TV ads in the U.S. getting. They were materialistic fools. So anyway, that happened. So I guess now I lost my well, anyway, this was so Yanukovych was overthrown in 2004 for the first time. Then he was overthrown in 2014 again, the second time. And that's right, because that time there was an IMF loan on the table, and the Russians came with a better deal because the IMF loans, and this is in general, this works worldwide. The IMF loan, you get the loan, and it comes with all these stipulations. If you don't cut everybody's health care, if you don't cut funds for education and infrastructure, you're not getting the money. And then you get the money, and then they say, well, you got to cut this, you got to cut that. They have, and then if you don't do it, you default. They began taking over your assets. The big thing they like to do is they like to put people on the board of your national bank. Americans, Wall Street thieves.
Hunter Biden.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and low-level Wall Street thieves too, like Biden, Brandon, like I guess that's his name. But anyway, so that's the deal. That's the hustle. And Yanukovych said, "We got to go with the Russians. It's a better deal. It's not going to completely devastate the country." Well, they went the other way, and they were already like last, and then now they're just in the toilet. So I mean,
well,
what can I say?
I mean, it's a war-torn country now. It's devastated. But yeah, so my understanding was the West was offering their economic agreement, and Russia had their own economic agreement, and Putin was like, "Hey, let's do both. You can do both." But it was the West that was saying, "No, it's our way or the highway. If you do business with us, you can't do business with Russia." What they were offering was significantly worse than what Russia was offering. And all Yanukovych did was say, "Okay, hold on. Because they had a deadline. The West gave him a deadline. And he's like, "Okay, hold on. I'm not going to make a decision just yet." And that the fact that he didn't jump on the West is the impetus behind the big protests in Kiev by the pro-Western Ukrainians. And the country was split. It was like 50-50 basically. 50% wanted to side with the West, 50% wanted to side with Russia. This 50% is including Crimea and the Donbass. So when you include that, it was a split country. But when the coup happened, overthrew the government, Crimea left. And so now it's not a split government. Now it's like, all that population from Crimea is no longer part of Ukraine. And so when you talk about the demographics of Ukraine, like the pro-Russian is no longer 50%, it's less because it's just in the Donbass. So they didn't want to be a minority and get voted out and have the majority people vote in these pro-Western Nazis. So they want their own autonomy. They want autonomy. They don't want to be governed by a U.S. client regime. So that's what Minsk was about. Minsk was about guaranteeing their rights, guaranteeing their autonomy, and guaranteeing that they weren't going to be oppressed by a anti-Russian government, pro-Western. I can't remember that name. Proxy government.
Proxy government.
What else? What else do we want to talk about in our remaining few minutes? We had a long list of possible discussions at the top of the show.
Yeah, that was very well put, by the way. Thank you very much for that. The last thing I had was the latest coming out of Ukraine. It gets to be a little tiring given the pace of the war. But apparently Bakhmut has been surrounded, and I've read in several places, and these are American military journals, that that the region near Donetsk that's being held by the Ukrainians around the city of Donetsk, that they're still shelling. They're shelling civilians in Donetsk. If anybody cares to know, is one of the most heavily fortified places on Earth, and the Ukrainian defenses. So it's been a slog to get these rats out of their holes, and of course it corresponds to what you just said by they bought this time so that that NATO and the U.S. could supply the material to build all of these complex bunkers and artillery bunkers that they use to shell civilians in Donetsk and to launch attacks and that sort of thing. But it does look like that might be coming to an end as soon as the winter sets in, the ground gets hard, and you can drive heavy vehicles over the ground again. It looks like it's probably the end for Bakhmut and its surrounding villages, many of which have already been captured by the Wagner Group. So,
yeah, it's been an interesting 10 months of a special military operation. It's ebbed and flowed, and I think it didn't go like a lot of people thought it would early on. Like I certainly thought, Russia would be able to make much more headway than they have been. But again, the reason that they haven't been able to was there's many, right? Number one, NATO has been supporting and creating a military fighting force that's top up to top NATO standards, and they've been digging in concrete bunkers, trenches, defenses, and so that's one reason. I mean, they're just very capable, and Scott Ritter gives them credit all the time of being very capable. And again, they're led by U.S. satellites, U.S. advisors telling them what to do and when to do it. And the U.S. invests a lot of money. We have a very good war machine, ostensibly. So that's one reason. The other reason is, Russia has been trying to, spare civilians. They haven't been going after civilian infrastructure. It's only recently, in the past several weeks, that they've been going after energy platforms and, civilian infrastructure that the U.S. would have done on day one, would have taken out totally. So, and then there's the fact that, the troops allotted to this special military operation were a very small percentage of the Russian force, total Russian force. They had maybe 200,000 people for most of the SMO, and it's only now that they're mobilizing more. So, it's hard to, it's easy to criticize, but at the same time, it's like, if we were in their shoes, are we going to do better? Like, no. I think it's kind of how Mao talked about, we're going to cross the river 1 foot at a time, and we're going to feel our way out, and we're going to make sure we don't make any mistakes, because we don't know what the West has planned. We don't know if the West is looking to get into a big worldwide conventional war. So we're gonna approach this cautiously and with restraint. And I think that approach has kind of upset a lot of commentators that just wanted to see Russia just totally kick ass. And I sympathize with that approach, but Russia's got to do, and I trust the adults in the room in Russia, Lavrov, Putin, and the government. Like I think they know better than I do what's in the best interest of their country. So, yeah. Any thoughts, sir?
Yeah, well, I agree with everything you just said. I would simply add that this week the EU official Vangeline, I can't remember her first name, she misspoke. Actually, she dropped the truth, and she said that 100,000, and she said this, Ukrainian military officers had died. Now, I think she doesn't have a good translator or something. It's probably just soldiers, but 100,000 Ukrainian military deaths. That's huge. That's enormous. I would like to finish and round this out like Finnegan's Wake, make a big a big a big globe, a world unto itself, and go back to the original COVID discussion we were having. And what I want to focus on is I want to challenge anyone out there. I want to challenge Max Blumenthal, Aaron Mate, uh, 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 Hinkle, Door, anybody. Go read about William Patrick III. Start there and start investigating the origins of COVID-19, because there was a COVID-18. There was a COVID-15. There was a COVID-6. This has been going on for a long time. It has been going on at the Dugway Proving Grounds, and it's been going on at Fort Detrick, not far from my home here in Washington, D.C., Fort Detrick in Frederick, Maryland. I challenge you to investigate this. And I'm going to give you one caution. And you look this name up too. Danny Casolaro. Okay? Just look the name up and see what happened to him. Because one of the aspects of what he called the octopus was his investigation of the Fort Detrick and the Dugway Proving Grounds and the U.S. long-standing, and don't believe this defensive bullshit, this defensive stance on biological and chemical weapons. The U.S. has been involved in biological and chemical weapons since there have been biological and chemical weapons, and they've been involved in them offensively. I'll leave the last word to Billy Bob, but I want to say one more thing. When April Oliver, this young journalist, was pilloried for bringing out the fact that sarin gas was used by the U.S. in Vietnam, I noodled around on the internet and I found a Navy vehicle merchant manifest. And on that manifest, it clearly said part of the cargo was sarin gas. Now, I was naive. And I told the mainstream media what I'd found. And of course, when I went back to look for it again, it was gone. So, you want to take this out? Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for that, Carlo. While you were talking, I was looking for the that quote from the PNAC Project for the New American Century. So Luciana Boone had posted this on her Facebook, and I read it, and I shared it on your wall too. But let me just read it, because it really talks about basically what you were saying, where this is probably, COVID in all likelihood was a result of biological warfare research, right? So here's what the Project for the New American Century says. It says advanced forms of biological warfare that can target specific genotypes may transform biological warfare from the realm of terror to a politically useful tool. Well, what country do you think they'd want to target with this politically useful tool? I mean, so it's very suspicious. And again, like we're pontificating, we're surmising, but I would not be surprised at all if hopefully, within the not too distant future, people can expose some real facts about the origins of COVID. And I think Fort Detrick is going to play a big part in that, no doubt.
Yeah, I don't care that Max Blumenthal is tired of being an investigative journalist and wants to become a stand-up comic. And I really don't care that Jackson Hinkle, a frat boy from Orange County with the $200 haircuts, wants to pretend he's a Marxist. And I don't care that Jimmy Dore, a comedian who's never read a book in his life, apparently, wants to become a investigative journalist. I don't care, but I really would wish they would have a deeper understanding of their responsibilities, given their large audiences, and I wish they would spend a little time investigating our friend William Patrick III and Fort Detrick, Maryland. as regards COVID. That's my last word. So.
All right, Carlo, I think it's about time to end the show. MUTIU was going to take us out. I appreciate those guys and their work, but if they want to they want to respond to our show, which I'm sure they don't, that would be great. But yeah. So thanks everybody for watching. The challenge has been dropped. Carlo has challenged them, so we'll see what happens.
They don't want to talk to me. I've been in it too long.
America Open Market, AO Market. The best digital market for humanity is a free multilingual borderless market open to international sellers with various languages included. With America Open Market, you may start selling in minutes after filling out the form. Comprehensive dashboard where you understand your sales, orders, and customers is available. You get paid directly, securely, and instantly on the America Open Market. You can sell your house, car, electronic laptop, CD player, boombox, phone, headphones, furniture, and clothing, and anything on America